When it comes to dealing with suffering and pain of any sort in this world, one of the teachings of the Bible that gives a great deal of comfort is Genesis chapters 1 through 3. Let me explain. Genesis 1 and 2 is the account of the creation of all that exists. God created the universe in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh. And after each day of creation, it says, God saw that it was good. Now, good to God is perfect. Day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 were perfect. And after day 6, after he had created mankind, God saw all that he had made, and he said that it was very good, very perfect. God created a perfect world. One that was absent of death, absent of pain and suffering. And that fact alone brings us comfort. Because although our world is full of death and pain and suffering, we know that we have a God who didn't design things to be this way. He designed a perfect world. He wanted us to continue to live in that perfect world. But suffering and pain and death, they weren't a part of God's original grand design. These were ushered in by what happened in Genesis chapter 3. When Adam and Eve ate from the fruit of the tree that God had commanded them not to eat from, the world changed, and the history of the world would never be the same. The entrance of sin into the world brought with it pain and suffering and death. When I think of how God feels about suffering, pain, and death, I can't help but think of the story of Lazarus. Lazarus was a dear friend of Jesus, and he was the brother of Mary and Martha, who you maybe know from other Bible stories. Lazarus had died, and Jesus had showed up after his death, which was obviously a great sadness for family and friends of Lazarus. When Jesus stands before the tomb of Lazarus, John records that Jesus wept. He wept because this was never how it was supposed to be. People were not created to die. People were created to live. But sin brought death. Paul says in Romans, "Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people, because all sinned." God didn't want for his creation to suffer or to die. But when his creation rebelled against him and sinned and brought suffering and death into the world, God would choose to use that suffering and death for his good purposes. You see, God himself would enter our human existence. Jesus would take on human flesh. God would become like us so that he could bear our sin. God would become like us so that he could suffer in the worst way possible, so that through his suffering and through his death, we would have life. Look at what Paul says here. "For if by the trespass of the one man death reigned through that one man, how much more will those who receive God's abundant provision of grace and of the gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ?" God used suffering and death for our ultimate good, for our salvation in Jesus. Knowing that alone gives us peace, no matter what we face in life. And it also convinces our hearts that God can use the suffering and pain that I experience in this life for my ultimate good as well. Lord, help us to continue to learn this and grow in our faith to trust this more and more.